Good afternoon, friends. We have been discussing the Sustainable Development Goals since morning. And here on the dais, we have a very eminent group of experts who are going to discuss discovering growth opportunities while activating Sustainable Development Goals for future strategy and success. As you know, the Sustainable Development Goals have given direction very clearly and succinctly to the development process. And certainly, as I'm sure my colleagues are going to exemplify, that they have formed a pathway creating growth opportunities for the businesses, for the communities, while they attain or attempt to attain or achieve the sustainable goals. So we have, I think, about 45 minutes for this session. And since we have 4 speakers, I think what we will do is that I would request each one of you to speak for about 4 minutes. And then we can have Q&A for that one person. If anyone wants to ask questions, let's make it interactive. And at the end, let's have another 5-10 minutes, and you can ask anybody questions. Is that okay with everyone? Is that okay? Right. So our first speaker today is Jihan Hafiz, CSR General Manager, Housing and Development Bank. So over to you. What do you feel? How do you feel in your organization you would discover growth opportunities while achieving the SDGs?
Okay, so thank you so much for extending the invitation for me to come and speak in this reputable forum. And although it's going to be very hard to speak after the fun that we had before, so it's very hard to compete with her now, but we'll try to make it as enjoyable as much as possible. I've worked at the Housing and Development Bank for the past 4 years. One of the biggest problems in Egypt and in North Africa is water. So I'm going to be addressing the SDG number 6, which is water. Now, there's a dam being built in Africa that will reduce the amount of water that Egypt will be receiving from the falls to about 60%. This puts it in a very critical position in regards to plantation, to sanitation, to everything that water is related to. In the Housing and Development Bank, we try to address problems in-house before out-house. So let me first speak about the problem in-house in regards to Housing Development Bank. So in most of our CSR initiatives, we are addressing the usage of water and how to get the best out of it. So basically, we are trying to fund the green plantations on top of the roofs. We are sponsoring the sensors in the water faucets in schools. We are funding the awareness campaigns with the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, all in hopes that if the dam works, because there are still lots of negotiations in that concern, that we will be ready, although it is going to be very, very difficult. In Cairo, like in the bank, we address the janitors. We do awareness sessions with the janitors, how to use water, how to eliminate the waste, how to put faucets on how to put sensors on the faucets. In schools, we teach children that we cannot waste money, waste water. We sponsored all the initiatives that is related to reduction of water usage. we also do funding for the irrigation systems that reduces the amount of water usage for farmers while increasing the productivity of the plantations. Lots of digital and electronic initiatives have been done through startups and incubators to help in that matter. So far, we have funded about 4 incubators just to address the topic of water. This is our main concern the time being for the water problem.
Thank you very much. I think water, as you all know, is one of the most basic of needs. So the work you're doing in water is very laudable. Is there any specific question to Jihan right now?
Thank you. I am Abu Yusuf Chaudhary from Bangladesh. And it's very nice to hear that you are going to implement a good program. But how do you ensure inclusiveness in your program? How do you ensure inclusiveness in your program?
When we say inclusive, like we try to include all civil society and government and schools, everybody who is concerned with this topic, we try to do, we reach out for most of the people who will be affected by this topic. So when we, is that the question that he's asking? Yeah. So like with the government, we work hand in hand with the Ministry of Water. They are the ones who do the awareness campaign, and we just fund the awareness campaign. So they are the ones who do the topic, how to handle the water, how to save water, all this program with planters and farms. They are the ones who address these issues. We just fund them.
So I suppose what you're saying is that because it's through the government, with the government addresses all classes, and therefore it is inclusive because they speak to all. Is that what it is?
This is part of it, the government, but like in the house, like in the bank, like when we change all the things, when we do rewards for the employees, for the janitors in general that use the less water, and we have a competition between them and we award them on a monthly basis. This is in-house, it's not related to the government. When we fund the programs for the over-the-roof planting. It has not been very successful yet because it's not economically beneficial and profitable. So people are a bit reluctant to use it, but we're still working on finding a form that is profitable for them so we can encourage them to do it. Part of it also is the first step with on the over the top or over the roof planting, because Egypt has tremendous garbage and people tend to store stuff on the rooftops. So part of it is we motivate them by cleaning the rooftops. This is the first step, which is an essential step to start the program. And then we fund accordingly to the results that they do. So we fund like 10% in the beginning. If they perform well, we increase it to 25%, etc.
Right, thank you. It's always, every project doesn't take off immediately, but we really appreciate the efforts made because it's only slowly that you get there. Okay, so may I ask you to go ahead now, please?
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm Forum Nagori and I look after CSR for the Taj Group. And before that, as a development practitioner, I've spanned the length and breadth of development work in remoter areas with Tata Trusts and with Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So I'll gather all of that and also use this as an opportunity to highlight some areas of opportunities that I see for the SDGs. And I'll just take a little time to speak about what we do as the Taj Group of Hotels. So our focus is on social inclusion, sir, and we use CSR as a tool to enable social inclusion, which means that skilling people to access workforce, not just of the of the brands that we work with, but overall tourism and hospitality industry, then ensuring we reach that skilling again to areas which are deprived or the fringes of society, till where mainstream education in hospitality doesn't reach. So that's the approach we follow in one area. We have worked across several partners, built capacities of partners on the ground to deliver the kind of skills that would make sense in that region and in the larger economy. So that is one. Another area which I'm very personally passionate about is how can my value chain of the Taj Group be accessible to people who would not otherwise get an opportunity to access mainstream business chains, which means can I buy some products, develop some products, work with certain services, for example, work with a community group who would otherwise never get an access to work with a mainstream business. So for example, it could be a Pardi group, it could be a tribal group, we work with cuisines, we work with several such areas where mainstream skilling is not an answer to what that community looks for as sustainable economic development or livelihoods. So those are the two large areas of work we do, and across our several hotels and brands, there will be small semblances of what we do. Here, while you are sitting, I don't have much, but if you're living in the hotel, you will see some napkins which are procured from Cancer Patients Aid Association, where we have developed that product with them. Similarly, several such products which we have developed with groups who have become a part of growing with us. So the idea is to not do pure charity, but to look at co-creating shared value in a way that our partner grows as we grow. And it doesn't affect if we have been a loss-making company for many years, but I take heart in saying that our CSR did not suffer majorly in the interim because of a lot of these value-based connects that we had co-created with our partners and partner institutions. So that is one area. Another area which I started out with that I would love to bounce off some of my dilemmas and some of the opportunities that I have seen in my practice over the last many years is how does, the corporate space or how does CSR get seen as something beyond funds? Something beyond a check that gets written and given, because that every foundation, every trust, many other sources do that. CSR has a lot more to bring to the table. Sadly, not enough is asked for. So sometimes I am trying to push the partner to ask for more, to ask for more complex stuff, to ask for can we look at co-creating something along with you, where you are looking for markets, where I am the business. Can we co-create? Can we innovate? So those are the spaces I think that are required in India today, private-public partnerships, which our country has not really done other than the books of finance. And I think a lot of scope exists there. I see a big opportunity there, and we would love to do more work there. That is one. Another is how does the D&I, the diversity and inclusion debate or dialogue in the country, actually look at addressing some of the pain points out there on the fringes of the society, especially the Indian society. I'm talking from the Indian point of view. So how does that happen? Is there enough push and pull? Is there enough advocacy that's happening? Or is diversity and inclusion going to remain a very comfortable topic where we work with the likes of people who we are used to dealing with in the corporate sector? So if we are going to talk inclusion and diversity in India, can we forget the tribals? Can we forget some of the people who, probably orphans or conflict-affected regions in our country? So these are some of the other areas of opportunity I see for a platform like this to say, how do we push the diversity and inclusion dialogue to become more inclusive? So that is another second thought that I wanted to bounce off. And the third one being, welfare and capitalism have both failed in their own ways. So how does crossbreeding of various thoughts of capitalism, of the market logic, the market systems, and of having the hand-holding and creating shared value come together so that we can look at including some of those communities who have been cyclically excluded over decades, and these forums and these conferences are growing. The number of CSR forums in this country are sometimes more than the number of real programs on the ground who do excellent and brilliant work or who innovate. So how does these forums then act as action platforms to make some of these things happen?
Thank
So
you
these
so
were
much
some of
for at the moment. It's nice to hear that the India Hotels company is actually sourcing a lot of their products, like the napkins that Forum mentioned. But so it's good to know that you are using that in business. 2-3 things I want to say to what you said, and then I just want to open it out. One is about the conferences. It's true that we do a lot of speaking, but I think this is also a platform for networking and also for coming together. As you said, if we can work together, of course we can work together. And I think most of us are working. And I mean, for one, we have more than 600 NGO partners because, for different things. Another thing, since the Taj hotels are quite widespread, in different parts of the country and abroad, do you sort of do CSR programs in the location with the population, the local population around you? I was just wondering.
Not necessarily as a rule everywhere, but we try and identify pockets of dire needs. Because, say, for example, London may not require as much work as the forest-affected communities or the communities around my Taj Safaris belt. So we try and pick out areas of concentration where we do programs. It's more a programmatic
the tribals
approach.
And all that. You do have some, I think,
We
probably
do
resorts,
have a lot of programs on the
maybe,
ground.
You have programs
We
around
do have
them?
programs.
Okay.
We have more partnerships on the ground, given that we're not a manufacturing setup and we don't have big CSR teams on the ground. We work with a whole lot of partners and build capacities of partners and co-create value.
Right. I had one more question. Do you have, being a very specialized, group and with a focus on hospitality, do you have any skill training programs for hospitality from the underprivileged or special communities, special children or otherwise?
Many. Not just special children, but yeah, with school dropout youth, we have about 14 centers that we run in different parts of the country along with Tata Strive. We also have a program with Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is a BVOC program, a vocational training program, one of its only kind where you actually get a graduation because our country is so focused on graduation. So, that's again in 15 different locations.
Is there any question? Any question? Yes, please. If you could stand. Can we have a mic there? Please do introduce yourself, ma'am.
I am Rani Patel from Arohan. It's based in Delhi. I think most of the questions as put by Mohini ma'am. There's no much questions. But one thing what I would say, we all speak very high about the things when we meet and all. But I think 80% of the grassroots workers or organizations, they don't have enough knowledge even to reach out to you. So, and the other thing is the CSR funds or whatever help, even if some kind of collaborations if we see, I think it is very, very high-hung fruit so that we cannot reach to that. Because many a times I think during last year I have attended some 50, 60 conferences and I met so many people, but when it comes to reach out to CSR heads or something, it's really difficult. And please, how to reach out to you. And if I could suggest one thing, rather than like reaching grassroots workers to you, why don't you people select the organizations who are doing good in certain streams like education or environment, whatever that? Because it is a great mess. Suppose I'm working in education. If I don't get funds in education, I immediately jump to some other things, and which is really like finishing oneself. Yeah.
Yes, I hear you, and we do try and reach out to many proactively, and I would love to see if there is something that Arohan wants to do where we could offer value other than just the funds, like I rightly said
It
in
is
the
for
beginning.
every grassroots organization, ma'am. Yeah.
So this goes out to all CSR heads. NGOs find it difficult to contact and access the NGO heads. So please make yourselves more accessible so that they may approach you for the funds at the right time and the right space. Thank you. Now may I request Royston Braganza, CEO of Grameen Capital India Private Limited, to tell us his views on growth possibilities.
Thank you,
The
Mohini.
SDGs.
Fascinating conversation so far. What I thought I'll talk this morning, or this afternoon rather, about is the global context of the SDGs and how we are seeing a climate and a paradigm that's probably different from what we've heard so far this morning. A lot of the focus this morning has been on CSR and philanthropy, but I'm glad, Forum, that you talked about much more than capital. How do we really bring in the broader sustainable space and a broader inclusion agenda? I think one of the key things we need to focus on is the fact that if we need to meet the 17 goals by 2030, then we need $30 trillion of funding. I was invited to speak in New York at the World UN General Assembly, and one of the things that is clearly something that everyone has to accept is that governments cannot do it alone. The ability for us to bring in different pools of capital is absolutely critical to be able to raise $30 trillion. How do we bring CSR, philanthropy, HNIs, capital markets, pension funds, government funding, all of these together in concert? And I think that's really the key. PPP is something you talked about, Forum, and I'm glad to hear the type of language shift that's happening in CSR forums, other than probably the point that we heard about how do we connect NGOs to CSR. I'm glad to see that we are growing beyond that if we need to really be serious about the SDGs. What is helping us along the way, and I put that on the slide, is the movement that we are seeing. The movement from philanthropy on one end and mainstream investing from the other. And again, Forum, you talked about how do we find this complementarity? How do we find really this blending taking place? And impact investing seems to be one of those areas where philanthropy seems to be blending with capital markets to be able to create a broader impact. I sit on the founding board of the Indian Impact Investors Council, and we have recently $5 billion of impact investing come into India. So the trajectory seems to be extremely positive. India seems to be at the cutting edge. And if you look at the type of names, I mean, I've mentioned BlackRock and others, Goldman, PNP, a lot of people today are saying, how do we bring mainstream capital into this space? And so I want to leave this group, Mohini, with 5 words of success. These are the tools that I think we can take forward, spelling out the letters GOALS. One is the need for governance and policies. The second is the directional shift towards outcome financing as opposed to input financing. The third is the need for authenticity and access. The fourth is the L, which is leaving no one behind, which is the backbone of the SDGs. And finally, how do we get scale? On governance and government, I think the need for policy enabling is critical. I won't go into the details, but we've talked about the 2% CSR this morning. Art mentioned that. Mohini, you mentioned the inequalities and the challenges that brings in, and therefore the role of government in catalyzing this. The outcome funding is a new tool. The fact that CSR has traditionally, or government funding has traditionally gone for inputs, build a school, build a hospital, build a training center, as opposed to, we will put money if maternal mortality rates come down below X%. We will put money if 90% of girls stay on in school. We will put money only if 2,000 women get placed. The ability to move from input financing to outcome funding is something that we have taken really the bull by the horns. We've launched last month the world's first domestically funded SDG bond in India for 2,000 tribal women in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. and would be delighted to talk to people in this room, Forum, Mohini, and others, to see how we can scale up the SDG bond in India, where CSR pays actually for the outcome and not for the input. Your money goes out only if the outcome is met and not otherwise. The third is the access to data. The ability to use data is critical. There is data that's happening all over. Unilever's Project Shakti, Grameen Danone's nutrition program, Shell through their green energy, Tata Indian Hotels talking about working with tribals and with communities. You talked this morning about Max Group. All of these very powerful stories of how we can really leave no one behind. For us, the ability of using the mobile phone, using digital, using the smartphone access to look at beyond just traditional data analytics and artificial intelligence to even blockchain is extremely powerful. And the last S is how do we create an ecosystem, a systemic solution. Grameen Capital was set up 12 years ago in India, and I created the world's first social investment bank. Now we want to do the first debt company, then the first social equity fund, and then a social stock exchange. So how do we create a whole ecosystem? I chair the Indian Microfinance Network, which has 30 million women clients. So the ability to build scale is critical. CSR is a huge place, and therefore the challenge for us, I will end with your inspiration and mine, Mohini, the words of Mother Teresa, waking us up to get something done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Royston focused on the importance of funding, which of course is a basic necessity, and of working together. So do we have a quick question here? Yes, please.
I'm again Abhichip Chaudhary. It's nice that you have respecting $3 trillion. You are channeling the CSR money through the government mostly. Actually, my proposition would be, if you want to really benefit the really excluded, remoteness, inaccessible places, okay, that in that case, it's not the government. It is the civil society, it is the local NGO, it is the local groups who should be capacitated and given enough resources. So can you decide actually in this component that certain portion of the CSR money, okay, you give the money to the government in a bigger way, but a certain portion should be given to the NGOs, civil society, and groups who are living in the inaccessible area, remote areas,
Right.
who can reach.
Right, thank you. I think he
Thank
has
you
the
very much.
question.
So I'm going to be politically incorrect and say no. I do not believe we need to be allocating funds anymore to any institution. We should be allocating funds to outputs. If you meet a certain goal, if you bring people below the poverty line, if you bring people into the employment, if you get maternal mortality rates down, if you reduce infant mortality rates, then we will fund you, irrespective of where you are, which city, which state, which tribal village. Enough of this, we will allocate across all over the place and put money. I think that time has passed. If we need to be serious about meeting the goals, let's be serious about outcomes.
So I want to ask you, then how, without any funding, how do they get to the outcome? I
So
mean, there has to be
Which is the beauty of the
funding
model,
for
Mohini. The beauty
for
of the
the
model is
execution.
how do we excite a new brand of capital? How do we bring in impact investors to come in first, put the money, and outcome funding pays back only when the outcomes are met. So we changed the paradigm of risk capital. We did that in microfinance,
All
and we've
so-
scaled.
No, but then the project is being funded. It doesn't matter to us from where, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay, thank you. May I now invite Tim Paterson. Tim, we have had the pleasure of hearing Tim since morning because he did an excellent job as the anchor of the program. And he is the CEO of Fuel Economy Solution Limited. So I think we get a brand new perspective here. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Mohini. Yes, didn't talk about my business earlier, but it's not really about me and my company. Climate justice, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about climate justice. 90% of the world's steel comes from coal. Cement comes from coal. 90% of the world's steel, 50% of the world's aluminium, and 41% of the world's power. Now, the Power Against Coal Alliance, Freudian slip there, Powering Past Coal Alliance. It was launched at COP23 by the UK Climate Change Minister, Claire Perry. I'm not being critical of the initiative, but we need to be inclusive. We cannot just be rich nations looking back that can afford to give up coal. Countries need energy security, like Poland, like India, and especially in India, you'll have an explosion of demand as your GDP rises, as your economy develops, and people demand more things. There'll be more waste, there'll be more energy requirements. Your energy requirements over the next 30 years will increase by, I think, 4 or 5-fold, I heard this week in Delhi at the World Petrocoal Congress. So leadership's important. Minister Claire Perry has led the way on the Powering Past Coal Alliance, but Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, he launched the World Green Economy Organization after 5 years after the inauguration of the World Green Economy Summit in 2014. His leadership, not just of the GCC countries as the lion at the head of the pack in developing the green economy, is formative in what we're talking about here, the values, the principles, and the technical excellence needed to make those progressive steps. The green finance was one of the 3 thrusts of the last World Green Economy Summit in October last year, leadership and youth empowerment being the other 2. So he's got his finger on the pulse. He's an incredible leader. And I would suggest that with India and the energy security needs of the future, what's happened with the SDGs and the Clean Coal Centre, the AEA-related Clean Coal Centre, is there's a lady, I can't remember her name, so I'm sorry, but they are mapping the value of the SDGs onto the coal industry and driving value through the coal sector. So much so that the Indian coal industry is now likely to become the cleanest coal sector, cleanest coal nation, as well as the most populated country on earth in 2022. And they're going to be looking for green finance initiatives from incredible supporters like Royston. And I would say that the thing I heard in Delhi this week was gasification. Now, I won't go into the technology, but basically you pump steam in the ground and you make gas and you use that as a clean source of energy instead of taking the coal out the ground and burning it and releasing particulates that go into mercury oxide through the stack and into the lungs of our children and each other. So gasification as a subject is going to become big. India, as traditionally as you are, you sometimes miss a step technology-wise, like telephony, and then you take a leap past everybody and you become a world leader. Call center operations and service sector being a perfect example. You're going to do that in the coal and the clean coal industry, ladies and gentlemen, and gasification will be your Kairos moment where you show the world coal can be clean. 96% of gas, syngas coming from gasification will be methane and will be clean as anything. So green investment is the way. Government inaction on statutory frameworks means we'll still be talking about gasification in 20 years' time without people like Royston to provide the cash, the money to invest in the technology that will take us to the future. We should talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good news to hear the expression clean coal. So we have actually spoken on a number of very important issues. We've got the very core issue of water here. We've got a very core issue of fuel. I think these are very everyday challenges, both of them. And not to say that finance is not. I mean, with finance, we can do nothing. And we also have been very happy to hear about what the Taj group of hotels, whom we are, so familiar with, in spite of the 5-star culture that they embody and manifest, that they are looking at or they do a lot of inclusive work at the CSR level. I was told that we just have a couple of minutes, so does anyone have any questions? Yes, please go ahead. Please introduce yourself and just indicate to whom you want you're addressing the question.
Yeah, Sanjay Deshpande, I'm the Executive Director of Clearfoot. We're a sanitation company. The question's to everybody. It's 2 parts. One, every time I say a value, there's always scalability at the end. Now, I always wanted to understand how you guys judge that? Because if it's outcome-based, scalability will not always be there because some solutions are more expensive and just cannot be scaled. And the other question I have is, I see a lot of organizations give only to NGOs and not directly to the corporate who has the solution. So the NGO has to go to the corporate influence. In the whole process, you lose 15-20%. So how do you address these two things?
So who's giving? Is it a corporate to corporate? Is it a who's giving it to the
If
NGO?
it's CSR, it can be corporate to corporate instead of corporate to NGO to corporate.
Okay.
Very interesting question. I think the fun answer is social enterprises. So a mixed model of having a kind of cause and business value or sustainable value proposition embedded together is a social enterprise. A lot of corporates would be comfortable giving social enterprises, but giving it to a business means your monitoring, evaluation, your ability to see whether there is social inclusion embedded, what is happening on the ground in terms of all of that. It's fuzzy. It's not impossible to do, but it's not the first preferred route. So a way of a social enterprise may be a good way to go if you're in it for social good.
Just wanted to add the point on scale. I think it's critical to be able to see a model that's sustainable and replicable. So to the extent that the social enterprise point Mohini made, I think is absolutely spot on. But the first G that I put in the goals was government. I think government needs to wake up and smell the coffee. If a Gates Foundation or a Umid Diyar or a Dell can invest in India in NGOs and in social enterprises, but Indian money cannot invest in a social enterprise because it gets a return, otherwise it loses its tax status, there's something fundamentally wrong. We need to unlock the HNI money, the CSR money to really invest in social enterprises. Today, foreign philanthropists are able to invest in for-profit social enterprises, but not CSR and not government. I've literally written the note word for the Social Venture Capital Fund for SEBI. We need to be able to get a category there which allows for-profit investment from CSR, which permits profit, but it can be redeployed and not distributed back upward. I think that's the key, to be able to have the guts to have teeth in a new policy framework.
I am from the Indian Army, and I'm not linked to any CSR or any such organization. I only have a comment to make. Having spent many, many years in the jungles of this country, where the poorest of the poorest in the world live, people are living in abject poverty in those areas. We in the army do some CSR there, or the equivalent of CSR in those areas. The corporate world has taken a lot from us in how to manage their corporates and how to do business. There are books and theories and research papers on that. Why is it that the people who are involved with CSR in the urban areas, I've seen this list of excellent people and background and motivation and all. How is it that I don't find a single name of a person from the countryside? Everybody who's doing good stuff is not organized into an NGO. There are many, many people who are doing such good work in those areas. So what I would say is that please reach out to those areas, reach out to those people. Can you imagine there are parts in this country where people are living on rats? Can you imagine there are parts in this country where you have to carry a person for 4 to 5 nights on a charpai to take him to a road to be taken to a hospital? So those are the areas where you have to reach out, because those are the areas that are becoming poorer and poorer by the day. And we all sitting here and we are talking CSR, please reach out to them. You are calling half of this country as Adivasis, they are half civilized as far as you all are concerned. So please, for God's sake, reach out to them, call them up, and see what their needs are, and design your CSR in that thing. So probably in the future.
Right.
I have
Thank
one
you.
more small
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm taking your time. In the background of this Pulwama incident that has taken place, I have an appeal to make to all of you, since I have now got the mic. Please forget everything. We can take care of ourselves. We can take care of our widows, our wives of our martyrs. We can take care of the children. We have institutionalized the systems which take good care of those families, but we have lost those lives. So please, my appeal is, be people, make yourself people worthy of something to fight for by us. Make yourself worthy to fight for us. Thanks. I'm sorry, I have not...
It's all right. Thank you. Point taken. And exactly your point of reaching out to the interiors is where we need more proactive support and work from the government. I've said this many times. The government can't outsource social responsibility to the corporates. So the point is taken. I think we have to engage forcibly. Sometimes we are a little, held back when it's talking to government and the power. I think we have to go all out and make them responsible. So definitely we should do this. Just a small point, in the lighter vein to your question about corporates and corporates. Hundreds of conferences we attend, and when people say, why can't we work together? Let me tell you, one of the very silly basic issues is co-branding. Okay? So that's where the problem starts. Whose branding will it be? Who's giving what money? Where am I getting the thing? Now, I just want a final word from Tim, maybe, because I think we've had a final word. And maybe, would you like to say something? No, would you like just a final word, and then to you.
Okay, so last year I was invited to speak on a plenary session on an investment forum in Poland. And we had a leader of a Polish People's Party, a former prime minister, and a local marshal of the 1/16th of Poland. And it was about the role of government in innovation. And one person wanted to say, let's just imitate, let's be an imitation economy. And I believe that Poland can be a leader in clean coal, just as India has the potential greater because of the numbers of people. But the role of government is to set the innovation point and the standard and the bar and the point at which regulation begins. A lot of the problems we have with the environment come down to poor enforcement and poor frameworks. So it's a lack of appetite and ability at the statutory framework level. Some ASEAN countries don't even have an industrial waste management framework. They have, thankfully, municipal, but not industrial. So my suggestion would be, government, you set the point of innovation, private sector, we then deliver from that point upwards.
Right. Thank you very much. A last word from you, just a second.
Okay, so concerning the rural areas and the poverty, especially in the southern of Egypt, we have created something that's very nice. It is the microfinancing initiative. It is done with the government, with the Central Bank of Egypt, and it basically it's a very small amount given to people in the southern part of Egypt, and with a very, very low interest rate, so to sustain a good living and to sustain, healthy living as well. This is one of the major initiatives that we have been working on in Egypt with the government. This is, and this is the PP that we were talking about. So this one turned very successful, and now with my bank, this is the fourth cycle that we've been financing this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to, we are between them and their lunch. So I'd like to thank each one of you, and it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being a good audience.